Hello, and welcome to the CDO Magazine interview series. My name is Jeff Speare with Ironside Group. Today, I have the pleasure of talking with Ashwin Ratan, who was VP of Technology at Burn Bootcamp during a recent effort that we're going to talk about today. Good morning, Ashwin.
Good morning, Jeff. Thank you. I appreciate you guys taking the time out for me, and thank you for welcoming me on your program.
Always a pleasure to talk to you. At data and analytics maturity curve, or sort of how, on average, people within the organization, think about data and analytics. Do you think that has changed in the last year and a half, 2 years?
We are a very data-driven company, right from the leadership, right to people at any level in an organization. Everyone wants data at their fingertips. And so, like I said in my previous conversation, is I think what I'm looking forward to is to see what that journey looks like in 2024 on what we can serve from an analytical perspective to the business in terms of just not just KPIs or SLAs, revenue growth, et cetera, is to really build that journey out and to understand what that will actually look like. Because I think it's eye-opening. We just did a very small piece, in my humble view, in 2023, right? That is just a tipping point. And then now I think is let's get to a maturity level, right? From a data and analytics standpoint, and that's just my standpoint.
So what does 2024 look like then, in your opinion, for you?
Oh, we don't know that yet. We're still working that out right now, right? And so we just started the year. Obviously, we are already nearly end of Q1. But I think that's something that I'm going to continuously have that conversation internally to see what that roadmap looks like, to building out what do we need, not just for the business, but also for our external stakeholders like franchise partners, if you will, from a reporting standpoint.
So, without getting specific, because like you said, that some of that stuff is still taking place, the roadmap's still being laid out. But from a more of a high level or a thematic perspective, you know, 2023 was about laying a foundation and sort of establishing some of that trust. What types of things follow on from that? What kind of thing would you expect to do next?
Well, if I look at it, I would basically go back to the roots of the conversation we had with Ironside when we first engaged you guys, was the project that we had to build a business architecture out. And in the business architecture project, we laid out a bunch of reports with use cases in there. So we can potentially look at that and go back and say, are these still valid? Because that was year and a half ago. And if those reports and use cases, business use cases are valid, then we can start to slice and dice those. If they're not, and we need to refresh that list, then we should start that conversation. That's where I see it, at least from my perspective, because the foundation of, I think the roadmap was already laid. We decided to just go with a smaller set of reports for Go Live for October with everything that was going on. Now that we have all that data that was worked on in that business architecture project, we could probably refresh that as a conversation and bring that back into a collaborative experience here.
No, that makes sense, and I definitely think it's a good decision to produce a tight, more focused initial effort to get some value, and then proceed from there. How would you balance, like you said, you've got a lot of data and a few reports on it, but then there's probably also data that you don't yet have, systems that you haven't integrated, like you were saying earlier. What's your opinion on balancing that? Do you make a lots of new reports on the data you have, or do you bring in new data sources?
Well, I would again say it's in my view, it all depends on what the business requirement is. I start with that, right? If the business requirement wants a new data source, then so be it. We bring in a new data source if the data source doesn't exist. If the data source does exist and the business requirement is to create a brand new report, then we build a brand new report. But it's a combination effort between the business and the technology guys and the operational guys to kind of get into a room and understand those three value concepts.
Yep, very true. That's very true. If you were going to list some lessons that you took away from this effort, what would they be?
Great question, actually. uh, every project like this is fascinating to me because you always learn so much from these kind of projects, especially when they are like these fast projects with a lot of pressure in terms of from a deliverable perspective to make sure the customer delight is achieved, if you will. And so one of the lessons I learned is be humble, be kind, uh, you know, and be open-minded. as the project moves on, because people bring great perspective, and it's important to listen to those perspectives.
Nope, that's very true. And from a if you had to think about a more technical lesson or lesson related to the technology, what might that be?
I think I learned a lot on the BI side from you guys specifically, and thank you for sharing all the knowledge. Because traditionally I've been on the BI side on the receiving end, and I've been on some other parts of the BI side. So I learned a lot of that, especially from the technical experience that you guys shared with me in building out the architecture. Which was not just related to the app or anything, but it was just purely from a BI dominant standpoint. So I learned a lot there.
Excellent. And what about any lessons you learned about? I mean, I guess I want to ask about data, but not mean specifically about your data, but about how to handle data in general.
Governance is always the key, for me specifically. And how do you continue to basically educate your people in terms of how do you govern that data? Because if you can't govern the data, irrespective of what technology you deploy, right? It's garbage in, garbage out, right? That's how it goes, right? So you got to continue to enforce that culture from a educational standpoint in terms of moderating the information. And it's always a learning curve. It doesn't matter, you can work for enterprise company or any other size of company, but it's governance is what I think that's where my head goes.
No, I would totally agree with that. And so I'd actually like to follow up on that because governance can mean a lot of different things. Different organizations have different priorities. So what aspects of governance were particularly important to Burn Bootcamp?
I think standardizing the data, first of all, that was more technical more than anything else, in my view at least, which you guys helped us do that, and I appreciate that support. And then obviously we are still looking at building out a true governance model in 2024, which is on the roadmap as well, as you're very well aware.
Yep.
So that's something that we would like to embark on. And obviously right now we've just spilled the beans in terms of the word governance in our culture. Now we want to educate that word and socialize it more from a maturity perspective on what truly that means and who owns it, which teams are part of it, what kind of skill sets you need from a business, technology, operational standpoint, if you will, right? And for anything else. And that's kind of where I stand from that standpoint.
So you would say this was what's been done so far was almost more of a tactical governance, and now it's time to move on to be more strategic.
Strategic and mature the model.
Okay. And we talked about that a dictionary. That's that sort of understanding of the data is one very important aspect of governance. Were there other specific areas or deliverables or things that were very important from a governance perspective for the effort that you've done to date?
We did not, I think, embark on that journey, Jeff, yet. I mean, more from a business perspective, like I said, I think that's more of a 2024 roadmap.
Yep.
To get us into that more, from a mental thinking thought process standpoint,
And just because I know a lot of people are, interested or looking into, there's a lot of dedicated governance data dictionary
right.
tools out there. Did you use any special tooling for that when we created the data dictionary?
No, we did not.
And you still felt it was successful and productive?
At least for the scope that we aligned so far.
Excellent, thank you. And what issues do you see, because like you said, governance is something you have to keep doing. What are things that are coming up now that's sort of making you say, oh, well, we sort of have to keep pushing on this governance to prevent things from backsliding?
Well, I'll backtrack that, because the first thing I think is back to how far do you want to take the BI initiative from a reporting standpoint, right? Depending on how big or small that scope is how we can define governance, because we want to be agile, right? We've always been that kind of an organization when it comes to, pushing the boundary. And so it depends on the scope of how far do we want to go from a reporting standpoint. That will, in my mind, will tell me, okay, you want to have 100% scope, say, for example, for BI, that'll tell me, okay, now we need 30% scope for governance. If you want to have 50% scope for BI, that'll tell me, like 15% scope for governance. So it all depends on that. So that's all part of 2024 in my mind.
Excellent. What other concerns do you have for 2024 in terms of what might be challenges?
Depending on what scope comes out in terms of from a deliverable perspective, can we scale from a technology organization as fast like we did in the last year and a half to deploy and deliver and hopefully not have many issues, if you will, is kind of my hope, which is like any other project. We go through the hurdles and the bumps in the road, but hopefully we have the support like we did with you guys as well to kind of react to that, if you will.
Do you feel like you've got a clear direction or vision coming from senior leadership?
We have a couple of projects in the pipeline which you're very well aware of so far. So I think we're going to embark on them from now for the approvals that we've got. And I'm still working through the rest of 2024's roadmap that was kind of aligned in early January that we spoke on. So I think more to come on that.
So you feel like it's because sometimes there might be a situation where it's even sort of getting to that point of what are the options, what are the things we want to do. It sounds like in your case you have a list of things and it's just sort of saying this one versus this one.
Yeah, but the world is evolving, the business is evolving, and so even though we have a list and a roadmap, that roadmap could change, as we both very well know, on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. So we just have to be flexible, if you will, as people, to understand what the business need is and kind of accommodate that and see whether we can accomplish those needs or not. Right? That's how I think.
Yeah, and how do you do that? How do you make sure that you're staying aligned with business stakeholders as their needs or their process changes?
We have regular cadence conversations, formal, informal. We go through the back door, if you will, for lack of a better term, to understand what's going behind the scenes. If something just going to pop up, so you got to have eyes at the back of your head as well when you're in this kind of a business. When I say in this kind of business, when you're in the technology business, serving doesn't matter what kind of vertical you are part of, right? So that's how I kind of operate for the most part.
Excellent. Are there any particular areas or technologies that you have your eye on for this year or next to implement?
I don't know about implementing or not, but I'm learning a lot with the word called AI. So I've
heard of that.
Yep. And so I'm spending quite a bit of time educating myself and seeking as much knowledge I can, which comes with a lot of noise as well, as we know, in that world these days. So I'm trying to learn a little bit more on where that industry is going in all different parts of the world and sectors of industry, not just fitness, but in multiple different sectors of industries, which I'm fascinated with how this is all kind of evolving, if you will.
So basically, sort of evaluating, assessing, thinking about where it can fit in.
Yes, AI 101 for dummies for me.
Fair enough. I think a lot of people are in that place where they're trying to see what makes sense to do. So, is there anything else, any other messages or anything else that we didn't touch on that you'd like to talk about or express?
Sure. Thank you. First of all, I appreciate the opportunity from you guys for getting me on this call. So thank you again. What were some of your learnings and your experiences being a part of this journey with us for the last year and a half, 2 years? So let's start with that.
Well, I am supposed to be asking the questions here, but no, I will say that a lot of what you said about the vision of Burn leadership and just I think the organizational I guess willingness to contribute and to be collaborative and team players was unlike anything I've seen at any other client that we've worked at. It was really something to behold, and I think that just that nature of being willing to put in the work to create these improvements and buying into the vision made all the difference in the world. I think that even when people disagreed, even when people had serious doubts, even the people at the beginning who were saying I don't trust the data, like they didn't give up. And so that was really very impressive to see.
Thank you. We appreciate that, and thank you again for all your support.
No, it's been quite the journey, and as you say, sort of this stuff never really ends. The governance is ongoing, and there's always new data and there's always new process. So glad to see you taking that journey and looking forward to what 2024 is going to bring.
Appreciate that. Looking forward to it as well. Thank you.
All right. Well, so thank you, Ashwin, for joining me today. And everyone, please visit cdomagazine.tech for additional interviews. Thanks very much.
Thank you.